Hey everyone, Linus here. And no, you're not in the wrong place, I'm just here to help out my buddy Sam with his first PC build video. He's got a pretty interesting challenge for us today. We're taking on the mythical beast that is a budget RTX 5090 gaming rig. I know, sounds like an oxymoron, right? But trust me, we're gonna try to make this as painless as possible for your wallet, without skimping on the performance, so buckle up because things are about to get interesting. Alright, so when Sam first told me he wanted to do a budget 5090 build, I'll admit I was skeptical. But then we started talking, and he's actually got a pretty good plan here. We're not talking I eat ramen noodles for a month to afford this budget, but more like smart choices that won't break the bank budget. And that starts with the CPU. Now you might be tempted to go all out on a top-of-the-line CPU, but honestly for gaming, the AMD Ryzen 7 9800X3D is a beast. It's got plenty of cores and threads to handle even the most demanding games, and it's not gonna bottleneck that 5090. Plus, it's a good chunk cheaper than some of the other options out there. Remember, we're trying to strike a balance here. We want something that's powerful enough to run everything smoothly, but we don't need to go overboard and spend money where it doesn't make a difference. This CPU is gonna give us the best bang for our buck, and that's what this build is all about. So yeah, we're going with the Ryzen 7 9800X3D. It's a solid choice, it's gonna get the job done, and it leaves us more room in the budget for other important components like, you know, that 5090 we've got to squeeze in here somehow. Speaking of which, let's move on to the motherboard. Alright, so we've got our CPU, now we need a motherboard to go with it, and since we're going with the Ryzen 7 9800X3D, that means we need a motherboard with an AM5 socket. Now there are a ton of different motherboards out there, but for this build we're going with the Gigabyte B650 Wi-Fi Bluetooth DDR5 motherboard. This board has everything we need and nothing we don't, which is perfect for a budget build. It's got support for DDR5 memory, which is the latest and greatest, and it's got built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, so you don't have to mess around with dongles or anything. Plus, it's a really solid board overall. It's got good VRMs, so it can handle the power draw of our CPU without breaking a sweat, and it's got a decent amount of fan headers, which is always a plus. And the best part? It's actually pretty affordable. You might be thinking that a motherboard with all these features would cost an arm and a leg, but it's actually very reasonably priced, which leaves us more room in the budget for other components. So yeah, the Gigabyte B650 Wi-Fi Bluetooth DDR5 motherboard is the perfect foundation for our budget 5090 build. It's got everything we need, it's well made, and it's not going to break the bank. Now let's move on to the RAM. Alright, so we've got our CPU and motherboard sorted, now it's time to talk about RAM. And let me tell you, RAM prices have been all over the place lately, but don't worry, we're not going to let that stop us from getting a good deal. For this build, we're going with 32 gigabytes, that's 2 sticks of 16 gigabytes each of DDR5 6000 MHz RAM. Now you might be thinking that 32 gigabytes is a bit overkill for gaming, and you're not wrong, but hear me out. First of all, RAM is relatively inexpensive right now, so we might as well get as much as we can afford. And second, having more RAM is never a bad thing. It'll help with multitasking and it'll future-proof our build a bit. Plus, 6000 MHz is a good sweet spot for speed and price. It's not the absolute fastest RAM out there, but it's more than fast enough for gaming, and it's not going to cost us an arm and a leg. So yeah, 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000 MHz RAM it is. It's a good amount of RAM, it's running at a good speed, and it's not going to break the bank. Now let's move on to storage. Alright, so we've got our CPU, motherboard, and RAM all sorted out. Now it's time to talk about storage. And let me tell you, storage is one area where you really don't want to skimp. I mean, sure, you could go with a traditional hard drive and save some money, but trust me, you're not going to want to wait an eternity for your games to load. Especially with a beastly GPU like the RTX 5090, you're going to want a fast SSD to keep up. So, for this build, we're going with a crucial 2TB NVMe Gen 4 M2 SSD. This drive is blazing fast with read and write speeds that will make your head spin, and with 2 terabytes of storage you'll have plenty of space for all your games, applications, and files. Now I know what you're thinking, Linus, that sounds expensive, and you're not wrong. NVMe drives can be pricey. But the good news is that Crucial makes some of the most affordable NVM drives on the market, and this one is no exception. So, yeah, the Crucial 2TB NVM Gen 4 M2 SSD is the perfect storage solution for our budget 5090 build. It's fast, it's spacious, and it's not going to break the bank. Now, let's move on to the power supply. Alright, so we've got our CPU, motherboard, RAM, and storage all sorted out. Now it's time to talk about the heart of any PC build, the power supply. And let me tell you, this is not the place to cheap out. You see, the power supply is responsible for delivering clean, stable power to all of your components. And if you skimp on the power supply, you risk damaging your expensive hardware. So for this build, we're going with a Be Quiet 1200 watt PSU 80 Plus Gold. This power supply is a beast, with enough wattage to handle even the most demanding hardware configurations. And with an 80 Plus Gold certification, you know it's efficient and reliable. Now I know what you're thinking. Linus, 1200 watts, isn't that overkill? And you're not wrong, our system probably won't even come close to drawing that much power. But hear me out. First of all, it's always a good idea to have some headroom when it comes to power supply wattage. You never know what kind of upgrades you might make in the future. And second, a higher wattage power supply will generally run quieter and cooler than a lower wattage unit under the same load. So yeah, the Be Quiet 1200 watt PSU 80 Plus Gold is the perfect power supply for our budget 5090 build. It's powerful, it's efficient, it's reliable, and it'll give us plenty of headroom for future upgrades. Now let's move on to the case. Alright, so we've got our CPU, motherboard, RAM, storage, and power supply all sorted out. Now it's time to find a home for all of this awesome hardware. And no, we're not just going to shove it all in a cardboard box. We need a case that's both functional and affordable. And luckily for us, there are plenty of great options out there that won't break the bank. So, for this build, we're going with the Antec C8 with 10 RGB fans. This case is a great value, offering a sleek design, good airflow, and a tempered glass side panel so you can show off your hardware. Now I know what you're thinking. Linus, a case with 10 RGB fans, isn't that a bit much? And you're not wrong, that's a lot of fans, but hear me out. First of all, good airflow is essential for any PC build, especially one with high-performance components like ours. And second, these fans are actually surprisingly quiet and efficient. Plus, they add a nice touch of flair to the build. So, yeah, the Antec C8 with 10 RGB fans is the perfect case for our budget 5090 build. It's affordable, it's got great airflow, and it looks awesome. Now let's move on to the cooling. Alright, so we've got our CPU, motherboard, RAM, storage, power supply, and case all sorted out. Now it's time to talk about cooling, and let me tell you, with a powerful CPU and GPU like ours, we're going to need some serious cooling to keep things running smoothly. Now, we could go with a traditional air cooler, but for this build, we're going to step things up a notch and go with a 240mm AIO liquid cooler. Now, I know what you're thinking. Linus, a liquid cooler, isn't that overkill for a budget build? And you're not wrong, liquid coolers can be expensive. But hear me out. First of all, liquid coolers are generally more efficient at dissipating heat than air coolers, which is important for keeping our components running cool and stable. And second, a liquid cooler can actually help to reduce noise levels in our system, since the fans don't have to work as hard. So yeah, a 240mm AIO liquid cooler is the perfect cooling solution for our budget 5090 build. It's efficient, it's quiet, and it'll keep our components running cool and stable, even under heavy load. Now let's put it all together. And there you have it, that's our budget RTX 5090 gaming PC build. Now I know what you're thinking, Linus, you call that a budget build? And you're right, it's not exactly cheap, but we managed to put together a system with some seriously impressive specs without completely breaking the bank. We made some smart choices when it came to components, opting for value-oriented options that still deliver excellent performance. And we didn't skimp on the essentials like the power supply and cooling. So what are you waiting for? Go out there and build your own budget 5090 gaming PC, and don't forget to send me pictures of your builds. I always love seeing what you guys come up with.